I love Superman, one of my favourite heroes. Or at least I love the idea of Superman. Some of the movies, not so much. But one of the reasons I love him so much is that you get to project and imagine yourself with Superman's powers and think, if I was Superman, what would I do? Or what should I do? One of the things that always bugged me about Superman, right, is Superman has his secret identity, Clark Kent. He works at the Daily Planet. When he's at the Daily Planet, couldn't he be out saving people? I mean, maybe he nips out occasionally on his lunch break or whatever, but he spends enough time there at least to hold down a pretty serious job and pay taxes and have an apartment in Metropolis and all the rest of the things the adults do, so isn't that all time that he could be spending saving people? Superman isn't like other heroes. He doesn't need to pay rent or eat and sleep, or at least not as much as other heroes do. Spider-Man can't be Spider-Man all the time because he's just not powerful enough. But Superman could drop the Clark Kent persona, live out of the Fortress of Solitude, and be Superman 24/7. Although one of my old flatmates once pointed out that Spider-Man could be Spider-Man a lot more of the time if he got a Patreon page and the citizens of New York crowdfunded him. But anyway, you get what I'm saying. Aren't there people dying preventably because Superman is spending time as Clark Kent? The idea that we could do more, and that we should do more, was famously discussed by Peter Singer in his essay Famine, Affluence and Morality, which you can find a free link to in the description. Singer tries to be uncontroversial. He assumes that people dying from poverty through lack of food, water, shelter, medical care, whatever, is bad. And he says that if we have the power to prevent something bad from happening without sacrificing something of comparable moral significance, then we should prevent it. Superman could prevent a lot of bad stuff from happening without really sacrificing much of anything. So it looks like Singer would say that he should keep being Superman until he reaches the point of marginal utility. That's the point at which, if he were to give any more, it would decrease his own welfare more than it would help anybody else. And presumably, if he's Superman, the point of marginal utility is a long way off, if it exists at all. Singer's original point isn't about Superman, obviously. Singer was saying that we need to do more to help people, particularly with regards to global poverty. Maybe one reply to this would be that Superman is supposed to be an example to humanity, right? He's supposed to show us the way so that we can be like him, not just do everything for us. Presumably, one day Superman isn't going to be around anymore. And when that day comes, we will all be better off if we've learned to be like him than we would if he just saved everybody he could. So maybe Superman is less concerned with performing the act that will minimize bad consequences, and more concerned with following the rule that in the long run will minimize bad consequences. And that rule is something like, be an example to humanity. Maybe he's not an act utilitarian, maybe he's a rule utilitarian. Or maybe he isn't utilitarian at all. Remember before, Singer said that if we can prevent something bad from happening without sacrificing something of comparable moral significance, then we should? Although he tries to be uncontroversial about that, it's actually pretty frickin' controversial. Singer believes in positive duties of assistance. In a nutshell, that means that if someone is in trouble and you can save them, all other things being equal, you should. The classic example is a child drowning in a pond. The pond is really shallow, you can walk in and save them easily, and you should save them. But some people only believe in negative duties. That means that you don't have to help anybody, all you have to do is not harm them. As long as you didn't push that child into the pond, it is perfectly morally acceptable for you to walk past and let them die. People who only believe in negative duties are called moral libertarians, not to be confused with political libertarians, although there might be some overlap. Libertarianism is unfortunately one of those words that gets thrown around a lot in philosophy and has a million different technical uses, a little bit like relativism or nihilism. Maybe Superman is a moral libertarian. He doesn't believe he owes anybody anything. If he wants to go out and save people, then yeah, that's very nice of him. But equally, if he wants to spend time as Clark Kent and let those people die, then that is totally fine. Maybe being Superman is supererogatory. It's good if you do it, but it's not bad if you don't. I've got so many more questions about Superman. For the record, I know that the answer to a lot of these will be, well, because it's a story, and if he wasn't Clark Kent some of the time, then it would just be really boring. I know that it's a narrative and some things are there for the fun, but does Superman get involved in wars? And if so, on which side? Or is he like the Red Cross? Does he help everybody? Does Superman get involved in social justice movements? Presumably he could do a lot of good there. If Superman endorses your position, then more people are going to get behind it, surely. On a direct action level, does he defend protesters against police brutality? And on a bigger scale, does he speak out against systemic injustices like unfair economic policies, racism, transphobia, ableism, sexism, homophobia, or what have you? If only there was a comic book expert that I could turn to who could help me with all of these questions.
Look no further, Ollie. What's going on, everyone? I'm Scott from NerdSync, and Superman is a fascinating character to explore. With over 75 years of history behind the Man of Steel, his adventures have tackled just about everything there is. When it comes to war, for example, Superman has in fact gotten involved before. There's quite a famous story where Superman ends World War II in literally 2 pages. He heads over to Germany, where he picks up Hitler, does the same thing for Stalin in Moscow, and delivers them both to the League of Nations World Court for trial. And this was before the attack on Pearl Harbor, so the United States hadn't even entered the war yet. That didn't stop Superman from taking the matters into his own hands and ending the war as quickly as possible. But I grant you that this story wasn't actually in a comic, but rather a random issue of some magazine. When it came to the actual comics, DC wanted their characters to stay out of the war for the most part. They designed covers that screamed propaganda, but the stories inside rarely ever dealt with the war. They even tried to explain why Superman wasn't getting involved by having Clark Kent be drafted only to fail the eye exam because his X-ray vision was acting up. So he remained in Metropolis. When it comes to social justice issues, this is where the old comics shine. Superman was created to be a champion of the oppressed. He was constantly taking down corrupt businessmen and politicians and helping the underprivileged. In his first year, he exposed horrible conditions for inmates in prisons, put an end to abusive husbands, stood up for the wrongly convicted, and even improved the housing conditions in the slums of Metropolis. This type of Superman is something that the writers at DC have tried to bring back in recent years. In a current story, he even stood off against the police trying to break up a peaceful assembly. He was depowered at the time, so the cops took the opportunity to aggressively attack him simply because they didn't like his presence in their city. The main question of why Superman isn't Superman all the time is a big one. In fact, it actually plays a crucial role in how Clark Kent manages to keep his secret identity, despite the bulk of his disguise consisting simply of a pair of glasses. You see, we as an audience know that Superman has a secret identity, but why would the people of Metropolis believe that? Until recently, when his double life as Clark Kent was exposed, spoilers, Metropolis would have no reason to believe that Superman isn't Superman all the time. He doesn't wear a mask like Batman or Flash, so it appears that he has nothing to hide. Plus, why would he ever want to pretend to be human? He's Superman. It seems only natural that he should be out saving people and making the world a better place 24/7 because he can. Perhaps that thought process is what keeps his double life a secret. But I think the main reason why Superman insists on keeping his life as Clark Kent is because it grounds him. It grants him a human perspective that keeps him in check. If he ever became a god full-time and lost touch with what it means to be human, he might as well be someone like Zod. All the power of a Kryptonian, none of the humanity. Coincidentally, that's one of the reasons why Lex Luthor doesn't trust Superman. He doesn't believe that someone that powerful would have humanity's best interest at heart when he could do whatever he wants, and there's not a whole lot that we could do to stop him. The other reason why Lex hates Superman is because he was responsible for the accident that made Lex lose all of his hair.
Your super breath destroyed my lab and blew the gas fumes at me, causing my hair to fall out.
So...
Wow, Superman fought against unpleasant prison conditions. Whoa, what a cool guy. I'm not really sure that Peter Singer would be persuaded by that reply, though. I think he would say that, Clark Kent grounds Superman's humanity, so he lets people die and that means he cares more? It still seems like he could be doing more to approach the point of marginal utility. What do you guys think? Who should Superman save? And is Singer right that he should be doing more? Thanks again to Scott from NerdSync for this collaboration. It's been really fun working with you, buddy. I did a video with him over on his channel on multiple universes, so go and check that out. You can either click on my face now, or follow the link in the description and go and see it. And for more philosophical videos from me every Friday, please do subscribe. Jesse Austin, one of my top patrons on Patreon, earned a reward by sponsoring the show. He got to ask me any question and I would answer it here. And he asked me, why does the gambler's fallacy not work on religion? It's said that the gambler would believe in God because if God exists, then he goes to heaven, and if he doesn't, he loses nothing. I think you've actually conflated two different things there. I think you've conflated the gambler's fallacy, which is actually something else, with Pascal's wager. Pascal's wager is the idea that you should believe in God because if you're right, you go to heaven, and if you're wrong, then you don't lose anything. There's a lot of problems with Pascal's wager, but the most obvious one is that it's reversible. You can make it work for a hypothetical God that punishes believers and rewards non-believers, and says that, well, if that God exists, then you should not believe. Last time we asked whether prisoners should be able to vote, so let's see what you had to say. A lot of people saying that prisoners shouldn't be allowed to vote, both here and on Reddit, just ended up restating the assumption that they shouldn't and didn't really explain why, or just said that that's the way things are now and didn't justify that that's the way things should be. A few people tried to fall back on social contract theory and said that if you break the social contract by breaking the law, then you shouldn't be allowed to vote. But again, they didn't really explain why not being allowed to vote is one of the punishments that comes with breaking the social contract. And in addition, you would have to defend social contract theory and show that the social contract matched up with the law, and a lot of philosophers would come after you for doing that. Some people said that prisoners have a vested interest when they're in prison, and therefore politicians could pander to them. But even if you could show that that was true, lots of people have vested interest and are still allowed to vote. I mean, look at Britain now, look at the British press. At the moment, the British press has a vested interest in keeping more economically right-wing parties in power, and yet the members of the British press are still very much allowed to vote and allowed a lot of say over politics, actually. Also, one person on Reddit said that if you break the law, you forfeit your tights, which I'm guessing that was probably a typo, but may also be technically true. Rolly Axes said that only people who pay taxes should be allowed to vote, and wow, that is quite a barrier to put around voting. That's going to rule out a lot of people. It's going to rule out not just prisoners, but everybody who doesn't make enough money to be taxed, which is a substantial portion of the population. Or would it be income tax that would be the decider, or would it be any tax? Because in Britain, when we buy things like cigarettes or alcohol or clothing or anything really, we have to pay tax on that. It's called VAT, value added tax. So I'm not really sure how you would decide which taxes count and which don't. And also, I think that idea rests on the assumption that the government is just a body that distributes tax money. And I think that might be a bit too simplistic. I think the government is arguably more than that. Selamon9 and a few others asked how taking the vote away from all prisoners is arbitrary. Well, if you are a prisoner and you've had your vote taken away, you're only going to be affected by that if you happen to be in prison when an election is going on. And that means that when you commit your crime will affect the severity of your punishment, not who you wronged or how severely you wronged them, or any of the factors we normally consider relevant to punishing somebody. That aspect of your punishment is determined by something as chance as when you happen to commit it. And that means that some prisoners will get more severe punishments, all other things being equal, than others. A few people said that worse offenders will be in prison longer and will therefore be statistically more likely to be hit by the vote restrictions. But do we want that kind of chance built into the system? Is it fair that some prisoners who commit the same crimes when all other things are equal get worse punishments than others? Is that a fair thing to systemically build into a justice system? Lou442 said that if prisoners are allowed to vote, then they will vote for things that make it easier to commit crimes, like shorter prison sentences or a lack of legislation and so on. But actually there's no evidence to support that idea. As I said in the video last time, look at the Republic of Ireland or Canada where prisoners have been allowed to vote. That hasn't happened. Shelley F said that prisoners not being allowed to vote is a deterrent. But again, as I said in the video last time, there's no evidence to suggest that it's an effective deterrent. So in that case, why keep it? Bob Sabol and a few others suggested that only certain criminals should have their votes taken away for certain crimes, like if you commit election fraud or you're found to be corrupt, then you have your vote taken away. And at first glance, I can see how that seems appropriate. Like, oh, you committed election fraud, and so you can't vote anymore, and that seems to match. But having thought about it, what is the link between somebody committing that sort of crime and disenfranchisement? And how will that link not be covered by some of the arguments we addressed last time? I mean, I admit that it looks appealing at first glance, but it seems like a lot of the arguments we talked about last time would still apply even in those cases. Max Schneider said that the two philosophers I pitted against each other last time seem to have quite different starting assumptions. Clegg, who thinks that prisoners shouldn't be allowed to vote, seems to think that voting is something you have to earn, and therefore that you can fail to earn that. Whereas Easton, who thinks prisoners should be given the vote, seems to assume that voting is a right that all citizens have. And I think you've really illuminated something important about the discussion there. There is a talk to be had about what rights are and who has them and who's allowed to vote and how that entitlement works. And the result of that discussion will certainly affect the prisoners' voting question. So yeah, I think that's actually a really good point. That's all the time we've got this week. Thank you very much for watching. Do go and check out the other side of this collaboration over on NerdSync, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!